I can't hear you.
Now you can hear me.
I can hear you now. Okay, Mimi, I just got your text. I was getting ready.
Okay.
What you need, sister?
I don't have a camera on this computer over here, but it's fine.
You don't have a what, sis?
A camera. I don't know if you guys
Timer?
Yeah. Her computer doesn't have camera.
I bought a camera for that computer.
Mhm. It's a better
It's a
spot.
webcam. I bought one, and it was on top of that computer. I bought one in speakers just for that computer.
I think I'm gonna sit like this.
How do I give you the host, Wee?
Okay, so you go to my name, my window, my screen,
Uh-huh.
and then there's the three dots
Change
on the
control.
upper right corner, and then click on that, and then say make me a host.
Oh, make host. Okay, now how do I have to log in, Wee?
No, you stay on.
You can make me
Stay on
speaker view
that.
like that?
Yeah. So
Okay.
this is you. Okay, then I'm gonna go around. I'm gonna make all of us a co-host.
Do I need to get closer? Am I situated right?
You're fine. You look good.
Hi.
I like your wall.
I thought you was gonna say you like my hair.
Oh, I like your hair too. You look good today.
Thank you.
Yeah, you
We're
look
bailing
happy.
people out of jail for Juneteenth, and the sheriff won't let us get certain people out. It's really pissing me off.
Oh. It's Friday.
Yeah, because it's making my hair black. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Widener will be our lead facilitators for this evening, and we have the amazing Jean-Louis and Mimi, who will be, making sure that the tech goes as well as possible. So we'll probably wait a couple of more minutes before getting started, and then it'll be good to go. We're still allowed to talk to each other, everybody.
Oh, fair
Don't
enough.
say
Okay.
anything. Yeah, just don't say anything crazy.
They can hear us?
Yep.
They can hear us and they can see us.
I thought they could see us. Okay. Hi, Annabelle.
Waiting for these.
We aren't quite getting started yet, but what an amazing time to be having this political education series. I was speaking, we were just talking with one another earlier, and Ron Wilkins pointed out to us kind of the importance of, we say policing in America, and honestly what we're talking about is policing in the United States, and using a Eurocentric very kind of US frame of mind center, and saying policing in America is definitely an overgeneralization, and not the intention of this series. And so that's an important caveat to make. Honestly, policing in America just sounded a little bit better than policing in the United States. But I do think it is important that anytime we do make those overgeneralizations, and honestly, it's not an overgeneralization, it's just wrong, assuming that the United States is America. It's very important that we, point that out to one another. And so thank you, Brother Ron, for making sure that we center that and begin on that. On that note, everybody, I'm going to be tapping out and backing off a little bit and handing it over to, you know, the one and the only Layla Aziz to kind of start pushing us through.
First and foremost, thank you all for logging in. We have 71 participants here. And I'm gonna say one thing. When I found out the guests we were gonna have today for this series of policing in the United States, I was super excited. We also have Danny here, who's an esteemed professor. This is gonna be an intelligent conversation, but it's also gonna deal with what we call the dirt, the mud, grassroots. Where we come from. So I'm just extremely excited. I want to turn it over to Danny to introduce our guest, and I am just so privileged to be here.
Yeah, Layla, thank you so much. I am also privileged and honored to be here, and I want to just take a couple of minutes to give a brief introduction to our guest and our lead respondent today. Brother who you see on the screen, Brother Ron Wilkins, is a lifelong activist in the struggle for the liberation of African and other third world people, both in the United States, throughout the Americas, on the African continent as well. And it's a person who I have learned a great deal from. And among other things, I think that he's always greeted me with a spirit of generosity and openness. And that is really an amazing, critical thing for, I think, older and younger activists to struggle to really share with each other. So I want to start with that word of thanks. Just by way of biography, if I gave a full biography for Brother Wilkins, the session would be over and we'd have no questions, answers, or information. So this is abbreviated. But I do want to say that he was a member of the legendary Slauson Village street organization. He was a co-founder of the first community organized police monitoring program in the United States. He was a member of SNCC. In the 1970s and 80s, he conducted extensive work around policing, including, we'll talk a little bit about this tonight, the struggle to eliminate the police presence in Los Angeles area schools. And I first met him as a young person in the guise around his work in support of the liberation struggles of Southern Africa, as well as the revolutions in Zimbabwe and Grenada. But we began to work together politically more in the 1990s around issues of Black-Brown unity in schools, among street organizations, among broader community. He organized me to go to the Costa Chica and really begin to learn about the African presence in Mexico. So he has a wide-ranging expertise. But we're really going to start today with a moment that was at one of the beginning moments of his political activity in life, which is the 1965 rebellion in Los Angeles. So we're going to talk a little bit about 65 as a point of departure. And we have a few images, but we don't want to let the images determine over much our conversation. We'll talk about them, but we won't let them determine us. But I did want to start with this picture that Ron shared with me. And this is a picture I think that for me has a lot of celebration in it. So I just wondered if, Ron, you might want to start by just talking a little bit about the circumstances of 65, what happened where you were when you heard things were popping off, just set the scene a little bit and give us a little sense of how the community responded in this moment. I think because we see and we hear often a lot about anger and rage, and what I see in this photo has those things in it, but it also has a lot of joy and positivity and enthusiasm. So I just wanted to start there and get your first thoughts and reactions.
Okay, Danny, I want to say, first of all, thank you so much for the very nice introduction. Thanks to Sister Layla and to others that are helping this event happen at this moment. The 65 uprising for me was very important. I lived on Imperial Highway, just east of Avalon, which is outside Watts. Technically, Watts, as I always understood, was about 2.6 square miles. Ultimately, the police and city officials created or established a curfew in what they call the Curfew Zone or the curfew area over 54 square miles. So you have to understand, of course, it was a much larger area where people were engaged in fighting not only the police, but also trying to punish and drive out and burn out merchants that had long exploited so many of us in the community. I was from, as you point out, I was from Slauson Village, which is the kind of like the granddaddy of street organizations in South LA. It's established itself in 1952, and I became a member of it in 1960 when I came into Fremont High School, began Fremont High School as a 10th grader. The images you see, of course, people are very excited, very happy. The rebellion got going on August 11th, 1965, after the Highway Patrol pursued two young black men, Marquette and Ronald Fry, in their Buick down Avalon Boulevard. They had just left a place where they had had some drinks, and Marquette was driving a little, he was weaving in traffic a little bit. So they pursued him. The Highway Patrol tried to stop them, but they wouldn't stop. Knowing how police behave, they decided that they would go to where they lived. They lived on right off 116th, just west of Avalon, right at 116th in town, in the Zandler Town Apartments. I knew Marquette and Ronald, and I should point out that they were from a rival street organization that was based in Watts called the D'Artaglians. I think they were from the D'Artaglians. But we didn't have animosity toward each other. We knew each other. We were on speaking terms and so on. The rebellion got underway because when the Highway Patrol stopped them, and I don't want to take too much time, maybe talking about all the little details here, but when the Highway Patrol stopped them, they had Marquette and Ronald get out of the car, and they administered a kind of a sobriety test with Marquette and determined that he was drunk. And they said, we're going to take you to jail. And then they also said, after a time, that we're going to impound the car. But what had happened is a crowd had begun to develop, including Rena Fry, the mother of Marquette and his brother. And Marquette, the mother said, if you're going to take him to jail for being drunk, but the car is not drunk. Why are you going to impound the car? I'm here to take the car. And once the police insisted that the car be impounded, Marquette hit him. He hit the highway patrolman, and that's when the fight began. Keep in mind, I lived only about a block and a half from where this happened. And so it was not long before I began to see people going to ground zero, as it's referred to, where things began to develop. And I made my way there myself to see what was going on. One of the, aside from Rena Fry, there was another woman that worked at a beauty salon. And I'm not sure now whether it was Rena Fry or the other woman that had on a kind of an apron or what they call a smock or whatever. They worked in a beauty salon. She ended up, this woman jumped on the back of one of the police because the police called for backup. But anyway, the people in the crowd began to say that this was a pregnant woman because they saw her wearing the apron. And that's the rumor that began to circulate. The crowd kept building, and the highway patrol called for reinforcements. LAPD and LA County sheriffs came, and that's how things began to develop. I called guys that I had come up with in my neighborhood, some distance away in Slauson. One of the brothers, I called his name, his name is Kumasi. I was telling him about it and he didn't believe me. So I held the phone up to my window from the apartment where we lived, and he could hear the crowd. He said, I'll be right there. But anyway, that's how things got underway. We had determined then that this was one racist traffic stop too many. It was summer, it was hot, and we didn't have anything better to do anyway. Most of us had no jobs. And so we decided that we were going to get down. But that's the rebellion. That's how things began to kick off right there at Imperial Highway in Avalon, which was just up the street from 100, just 2 blocks away from 116th.
You know,
This is an interesting image. Yes.
Oh no, I was just going to say, it's so interesting to hear you talk, one, about the summer and the season, but secondly, the fact that people didn't have jobs, right? Because we're in this situation right now where we have a lot of street activity, a lot of people are mobilizing, and of course, the economy, we know, is bad for everybody. It's doubly bad for Black and brown folks. And people being cooped up in the house. So it's just interesting to note that that parallel and similarity. But please do go on, tell us.
Sure, this is a photograph. I love this photograph. This was at Imperial Highway in Avalon, and the LAPD had set up their first command post there. And you see the crowd. The guy there just to the left of the screen with his arms up and a smile on his face is me. I was a youngster, I was still a teenager. And I was, you could see a lot of people looking at me because I was staring at the police. I was taunting them. I was telling them that they were just a white gang with badges and we were gonna whoop you. I said, we're gonna whoop you and run you out of here tonight. And we did just that. The guys around me, you'll see, some of them I knew. I don't need to call any names here, but I knew them. You see them throwing up 3 fingers. We threw up fingers for what neighborhood we were from, what street organization we represented. 3 fingers were for guys from Watts. If you had 2 fingers up, that was Slauson Village. That was those guys from my neighborhood. If you had a G up, that was for gladiators, B for businessmen, and so on. I was turning to the guys and saying, look, it's not about what neighborhood we're from. It's about us needing to join forces and submerge our differences, forget about the differences we have, because the police have pushed us up against our doorsteps, and we got to defeat them and run them out of here tonight. I didn't pose for this picture. I was just standing there. And it's interesting because there was a brother from Muhammad Speaks newspaper. That was the Muslim newspaper at that time. I knew him, and I saw him position himself to take the photo, so I didn't dodge. He took the photo, and right after he snapped it, a white guy jumped in there with the camera, and he was working for the LA Times, and he snapped the photograph, and it actually appeared on the front pages of the LA Times. But I think it's one of the most interesting, and I think it speaks volumes, the picture itself. You can see some people smiling. Some people will have a very disturbed look on their face. They were very angry because they had already seen relatives, close friends arrested. But this was when things kicked off there at Imperial Highway in Avalon.
And if I'm not mistaken, somebody said to me that before the rebellion was over, you attended something like a third of the memorials and funerals for people who were killed in the time?
I went to a number of funerals. In fact, during the uprising, it's reportedly the first fatality on our side was a young brother named Leon Posey. We had left this area where this photograph was taken the next day, and we had gone to Broadway in Manchester, where there were a lot of businesses. We decided we were going to go there, and we were going to punish those merchants there and destroy their operations, their businesses. And so we went there, and LAPD was on Broadway. They were in the middle of the street. They had taken up positions behind their vehicles, and they had their weapons out, and they were shooting. And I could see a number of the weapons pointed in the air, so I thought they were just shooting in the air. But Leon Posey, right at the corner of 88th and Broadway, had just walked out of a barbershop, had a nice haircut. He was totally unaware of what was going on, and he walked out. He stood about 4 or 5 feet at most from me, and he had run his hand over his head, feeling very good about the haircut he had just had. And all of a sudden, I saw him get hit, and he fell over backwards. His knees never bent, and he hit the pavement, And I said, oh, they're shooting at us. And that's when a number of us began to retreat into the alley there. But Leon Posey was one of those people, and they say he was the first fatality during the uprising. But yes, I went to a number of the funerals, and most of the people, it should be borne in mind that most of the fatalities, they said it was officially 34. I count something like 39. Everyone, from a 6-year-old boy to a 63-year-old man. But most of the people that were shot were either intoxicated or they were shot through the back. Some were shot for not obeying an order to turn right at this corner or left at this corner, with orders given by police and later the National Guard when they came in. But yes, it was very, very rough. But it was a time that I have to say, I felt very good because we were fighting police. We had police running from us, police on the floors of the police vehicles, covering their heads with their arms and elbows and begging for mercy. That was very interesting. We also attacked a lot of white civilians there on Imperial Highway. Imperial Highway runs east to west. And many people who worked out in the LA airport area, that end of town, coming from far east, traveled on Imperial Highway, and we whooped a lot of white folks, civilians as well as police. And for 6 days and nights, we felt free. Even the air traffic going into LAX had been diverted because of alleged sniper fire and the rest. But those were some of the best 6 nights of my life, 6 days and nights.
Layla, do you want to jump in with a comment or question?
I'm just astounded that having this elder here and speaking, it's right on time for what we're dealing with, what happened in the Mesa. And one of the things that Pillars works closely with, that is our membership, our constituents, are those who are from street organizations. And I was listening to one of your interviews, and you talked about trying to join the Boy Scouts and how these are really clubs and groups. I want to know if you could elaborate a little bit on that and what this whole gang term, which ends up with gang documentation, surveillance, and of course incarceration, and how it seems like it's by design.
Yeah, I wanted to say first too that one of the, probably of all the people that were killed during the Watts Rebellion, everyone should remember Joe Nelson Bridget. There's an interesting book. It's called Years of Darkness, Rivers of Blood. I forgot the author now, but he describes how Joe Nelson Bridget, who was from our neighborhood, from Slauson. Joe Nelson Bridget was 22 years old. He was the 22nd fatality during the uprising. He was in a store on Florence and Miramonte and with some other people. And the sheriffs had surrounded it. He ended up wounding 2 deputy sheriffs. And then other reinforcements came and got around the building. And they described when Joe Bridget came out of the building, he came out like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He had a pistol in each hand, firing. And they literally cut him in half with a shotgun blast. But we gave, from Slauson, we would come to Watts. We did it for years, doing Watts Rebellion commemorations. And we gave out a Joe Nelson Bridget Award for Valor to the person that stood up best in the year running up to the time that we did our commemoration. So I just wanted to mention Joe Nelson Bridget. You talked about street organizations. One of the beauties too of the uprising, one of the beautiful things is it had us set aside our differences. And even though we had rivalries, it was a kind of neighborhood competition where to see how many police cars and cars owned by white civilians we could overturn and set ablaze in intersections in the neighborhoods where we were dominant. And so there was that kind of interesting rivalry that was going on. And what it also meant, the rebellion for me was it was the cauldron that actually set me in motion and had me go from being a misguided street tough to someone that developed some political consciousness, some revolutionary consciousness, and decided that my real enemy, that my real adversary was not only the LAPD, but the US government and its policies and so on. But I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
These are interesting. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to make that transition because you talked about that kind of, I guess, intensification and developing struggle with the police. And of course, we know the police reorganize themselves and figure out how they're going to come back into the community. I believe there's a killing in 1966, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct, correct. Mm-hmm. In 1966, in June, a 27-year-old Black man named Leonard Deadweiler was taking his wife, who was pregnant, Barbara Deadweiler, to County General Hospital because there was no King Hospital then, and he had to drive a great distance. She was pregnant, and they both believed she was in labor. And so it was an urgent thing for them. So he was driving very fast. He put a handkerchief, he tied it on his car antenna as he was speeding. So when police would notice him, they would see that he was letting them know that he was in distress, that he had a real emergency. And so he sped through the streets of LA. LAPD began to chase him. They began to pursue him. And when his car finally stopped, I think the cop's name was Gerald Bova, if I remember correctly, the cop walked up to the driver's side of the car with his pistol out, and then claimed that the car lurched forward, which caused his pistol to discharge. They had such a thing for years in LA known as the coroner's inquest. When someone would be killed by the police, they held what was called a coroner's inquest, and they always cleared the police. They did that in the case of Deadweiler, and this was 10 months after the Watts Rebellion. This was, again, June of '66, and we decided that was unacceptable, and the city was very worried that there was going to be another uprising. And some of the groups got together, a number of us pulled together in what we call the temporary alliance of local organizations. And it was that group that created Community Alert Patrol. And we decided that we would ride the streets and police the police. So we developed the policy. Plymouth, I came out of a street organization. We used to ride in vintage cars. We saw ourselves as tough guys. I got on a Stetson hat there. I got on Stacey Adams shoes. We used to dress in school. We outdressed the teachers, which also got us in a lot of trouble. But anyway, you see the signs on the side doors. That car was one of the most well-known cars for it. And I could tell you some incredible stories, but I know there's no time to tell them all now. I remember a lot of the people who wrote. That's interesting about the patrol is that we had brothers like Albert King, who was straight out of Watts, out of Imperial Courts. We had guys like Cornell Henderson from the Businessmen out of South Park. James Henry, his nickname was Cosmo. He's transitioned now. That's another thing. So many of the people I'm talking about have moved on, or not with us, or not no longer among us, but they put in some serious work in the community. Cosmo came out of Estrada Courts, and on the east side, we had a guy ride with us named Victor Ramirez. Victor's father was Mexicano, his mother was Australian. He looked like a straight out white boy, had blue eyes and all that, but he identified as a Chicano. And from time to time, he rode with me in the patrol car. Police would stop me and look at Victor and say, "What you doing? You a white boy. What you doing riding with these niggas?" You know, and Victor would say, "I'm not no white boy." And we get in a big argument with the police and all that. Victor's gone now. I really miss him. But we had, there were times with this car that you're looking at here, I was on Vermont one time, headed north, passing Manual Arts High School, and the LAPD was in the black and white on the other, in front of the school, facing the other direction, with the ticket book out, and they had the people's ID from the car that they had just stopped. They were writing them a ticket or something. There were two white dudes in the car, white LAPD, and when they saw me, their eyes, they just stared at me as I was going by, and they ended up rushing back up to the car that they had stopped, gave the people back their ID, and jumped in their car. And just as they were doing that, I U-turned in the middle of Vermont, which was an illegal turn. U-turn, they sped off, and I chased them. I chased them for about 2 blocks. Here I am in this old vintage car you see here, chasing a brand new LAPD cruiser. And after a while, I told the brother riding with me, I said, man, we better cut this out, because they probably setting up something for us down the road. So I put on brakes, and we turned around and left. But I want to tell people, the LAPD are a bunch of cowards. Their courage comes from all the vast weapons they have, including military weapons. They've got quite an arsenal. When you really get them in a corner or pin them down, they really, they chumps. And one needs to know that. I just thought of this term the other day, not that it's any new term. The police actually function as death squads. That's what they're doing, not just in LA, they're doing it around the country. They stop us. They can do whatever they want to do above the law. And I wrote a piece that I want to mention that's out there. It's on Facebook, and they just put it on, they also put it on blackagendareport.com. If you go there, you'll see it. But I talked about the history of policing. You know, police come from and the reason police target Black people more than any other group is because police culture the police culture today grows out of the slave patrols and the plantation police. They had slave patrols. The first one was 1704 in South Carolina. And then they went 1726, the slave patrol, they started one in Virginia. And then in the 1750s, you had Georgia and North Carolina developed slave patrols and plantation police. What did they do? They used to, on the plantation, they made sure that there were no meetings going on because they felt our ancestors were plotting uprisings against those who had enslaved them. They enforced curfews. If we were out moving around, they checked us for passes to make sure we had a legitimate reason that some white person had written some note or something for us to be out. They crushed uprisings. This is what they did. And that's what do police do today? They do those very same things, and they racially profile us. So that's where the police culture grows out of. You should know that it was out of slave patrols, armed white men that used to pursue runaways and punish us and chain us back up, tie us back up, and return us to the plantations. It was the slave patrols is what the Texas Rangers ended up developing out of. Texas Rangers hate Mexicans, and not just Black people have been lynched. I did some research and found that literally thousands of Mexicanos were lynched by Texas Rangers and so on. So we need to be clear about that part of the history too. But yeah, police are bad news. And as I said, they're literally death squads. And it's a shame that they've gotten away with so much that they've gotten away with. They've literally killed thousands of our people since 1966 when we established the first patrol. And part of what I'm saying is community alert patrols need to be brought back into existence because right now the system, these municipalities and police departments around the country are making concessions to our people. They're saying we're going to stop doing chokeholds, we're going to stop racially profiling, we're going to stop this, that, and the other. Then someone needs to monitor those developments to make sure that the police are doing just that as we pursue something larger than that, which is defunding the police and eventually police abolition. That's the ultimate goal, but it's going to take us a while before that happens. They need to be policed in the meantime. So alert patrols need to be reestablished all over this country. And I'm saying that's what I call for in my piece, yes.
I think Layla wanted to ask a follow-up about that, about organizing questions. So
Sure.
I'll turn it over to there.
Sure.
Before I even go, sir, did you just give us permission to use Community Alert Patrol?
Sure, absolutely.
I thank you, sir.
I was field commander. I was heading the patrol for most of roughly its year of existence here in LA. Yes.
It would be an honor, and just to have you to kind of guide the way. Everything that we're going through now has already been done. You guys have already paved the way. I had a follow-up question. What are some of the strategic steps you think that we as a people, and from your wisdom and experience, from spontaneous rebellion to actually sustained organizing, and tying that into some of the work that Boggs and Foreman did?
I'm glad you mentioned that. James Foreman was my mentor. He's the one we call the old man in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. That's him there, locked arm in arm with Martin Luther King. And he was locked arm in arm with King on so many marches. I learned a great deal from him. You ask a hard question there, tough question, but I'm happy you raised it. James Boggs and Grace Boggs, people may not know, James Boggs came out of the auto industry. They were based in Detroit. Grace Boggs was Chinese. James Boggs was probably, in my opinion, the greatest theoretician of the Black Power movement. And one of the books he wrote, you see one there, Manifesto for a Black Revolutionary Party. I'm gonna hold up another one. I don't know if you can get it on the screen here, but you see it's called the Awesome Responsibility of Revolutionary Leadership. It's a hell of a piece, because what Boggs pointed out, just as you just said, we have to move beyond spontaneous rebellion. We have to get beyond, because what is the ultimate goal? This is a country we live in. We have as much right to this country, this society, even though, let me preface that by saying, this is indigenous people's land, and it was taken by force by these pilgrims and these colonists who came here and tried to wipe out the indigenous people and so on. But anyway, but I'm saying we're looking at this in this particular period of time. This country certainly does not belong to the Europeans, and so much of our labor has gone into this country. What I'm saying is we need to replace the existing centers of power in this country. The people who live here, we need to run the country. It shouldn't be run and people benefiting from it who make all this money, exploiting everyone and making war on people all over in other parts of the world, even developing, weaponizing space. Because the people who run this country intend to dominate the world for all time to come. And that is their goal. We need to be very clear about that. We need to remove them from power. We're the many and they are the few. They simply have us out organized. James Boggs, in this book, The Awesome Responsibilities of Revolutionary Leadership, pointed out many years ago that there are 4 essential things that need to be in place for us to take power. We need to create a revolutionary party, a Vanguard revolutionary party. Vanguard means the most advanced. I don't want anyone to confuse that with one of the titles they gave to a Black Panther Party film. I knew the leadership of the Panther Party before, I knew Huey, I know Bobby Seale, I knew Cleaver. We struggled with them. I was in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee when we had an alliance with them. I was one of the main people that was the liaison between the central committees of SNCC and the central committee of the Black Panther Party. The Panthers were a great organization. I want to say that. There were many courageous Panthers, women as well as men. Many of them are in the ground, and I miss them, love them dearly. But I also need to say the Panthers made serious mistakes. One of the worst mistakes was to be the Black Panther Party for self-defense. You don't fight a country, take on a country as capable as this one, as well-armed as it is, and as advanced technologically as this is, and talk about you're going to engage in self-defense. You have to take the offense. You have to fight the war of the flee, okay? And the Panthers did not understand that. They made incredible mistakes. You don't say today's pig is tomorrow's bacon. If you can't make that happen, you have to, you don't go into a building after saying things or creating some commotion with police. You go into a building and they simply surround you and wait you out or starve you out or gas you out. So that was a big mistake. The other major mistake of the Panther Party, and this needs to be understood, is they were guilty of what many of us call loose recruiting. They did not screen their members adequately. Panthers were riddled with a lot of police. Fred Hampton, one of the greatest Panthers who headed Chicago office. Me and Fred never met. We talked on the phone. I wanted to meet him. I've met other members of his family, never met him. But when Fred was killed, he never came to when they surrounded the Panther office and shot him up because he was drugged by his security, who was his top security man, was the police. And we have to admit these errors, these mistakes, these weaknesses. And this is part of the criticism that we have to make of ourselves and so on. So the Panthers made serious errors. I want to come back to Boggs. Boggs said a Vanguard Revolutionary Party needs to have 4 critical components. The first is ceaseless ideological struggle. You have to have your idea about the kind of society you're trying to create, what the values are going to be and how it's going to be run, and you have to continue to push forward those ideas. The second, he said, was very rigid discipline of all the members, for all the members. The third was organized activity on the part of every member, organized activity, not just somebody just doing their thing. It's got to be really organized and well thought out. And the fourth, he said, was self-criticism. He said merciless self-criticism, criticism. Before I can criticize you and talk about what your shortcomings are, I need to confess to what are my own mistakes, my own errors and weaknesses. And then I can say something about you. But this is where we need to go if we're going to develop the kind of instrument that's going to ultimately take power in this country and move us beyond spontaneous uprisings and rebellions.
Can I ask you a follow-up question about that piece on criticism and self-criticism? I think it's fair to say that a lot of us, as Black people, we're dealing sometimes with limited resources, not just financially, politically, but emotionally. And it's very difficult to be put in that situation where other people are criticizing your work, they're criticizing your attitude or maybe your willingness to listen, your knowledge, whatever it might be. Do you have any kind of suggestions about how to help people move to a place where they understand that process as one that helps them develop as organizers, as revolutionary people, as human beings, period, just from your experience? Like what do you think helps people get it? Why can't some people get there? Any kind of thoughts about that process, I guess?
It's tough. It's tough because the people that are among us who are the poorest and the worst off, many of them don't read. We used to say in SNCC, in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that reading is a middle class habit. And so the average person does not want to read, but we have to help them. We have to push them. And one of the things I liked about these, what I held up here that Boggs did, I have some of the work by Jim Foreman. Here's one called Control, Conflict, and Change. He talked about different control factors things that keep you from getting involved in a movement and getting involved in revolutionary activity and so on. We had a brother named Irving Davis. He was Jim Foreman's right-hand person in New York in the Office of International Affairs. Irving used to say that advice is free, but you pay for experience. And so advice is free, but you pay for these are important things to learn from. This was something that Boggs has put out. It's called Change Yourself to Change the World. It was put out by a group called the Committee for Political Development. These were young people in the Detroit area that Boggs had a great influence with. I got to know a number of them. It's a powerful piece because what it also says is that if you say you want to change the system, you're going to fight the system and change the system, you have to be about what it is you're talking about creating. If you're selfish and you don't care about other people, why are you going to take out some people that are selfish and don't care about them and replace them? You've gotten nowhere because you have the same faults, the same weaknesses that those people have. Che Guevara, back in the day, Che talked about the creation of the new man and woman and said the basis for the new morality had to be one struggle against injustice. We were saying that here inside the United States. We were reflecting on one another. But it's difficult. It's a process. And one thing you do is you limit the text. That this article I just referred to that I have written and that I put out, it's only a page and a half. This article is a page and a half. So it don't take much to read. I say I wasted some paper here. That's not good either, to waste paper. But because I don't want the average person to get bogged down trying to read 3, 4, 5 pages or more. You get to the what do I say? What it is? There's a saying: the quick and dirty. You nip it right in the bud. You get the message across.
We have on the Q&A from Flaco. Do you want to, Layla, maybe ask Ron his question?
Sure. Flaco's on. Flaco is one of our he's pillars from the top to the bottom. Did time in prison. So Flaco's asking, please expand on ways to overcome loose recruiting. That's imperative to the movement, as we are having people from Stratford trained intelligence agencies showing up in this movement and creating divides and conquering us or creating severe conflicts. Please help us understand ways to overcome this. Help us get the feds up out of there, sir.
Well, one of the things you do, you learn to not say things, just anything on the telephone. We had a saying back in the day, in SNCC days, don't say anything on the phone that you can't stand to hear later on in court. And so if I got something to say, there are things I know I'm going to take to the grave, and I would never say them on the telephone. I'm going to come and see you. I'm going to take the time and put the gas in my car to come. I'm going to come see you, and face to face, I'm going to tell you. The other thing is, I was just talking with someone today from our neighborhood this morning, and we were talking about some of the stuff that's going on right now with the protests, and how you have one guy in the street, and he'll turn to the whole crowd and say, let's go over here and do this. Let's go over and torch that, or let's hit this person or do something. The first thing we're gonna say is, well, who are you? Who are you? You know, where you from? Who you run with? You know, what's your history? So it just can't be just anybody. But I noticed I don't watch television, but anyway, I've been watching some of the video stuff via computer with some of the protests, and I've seen all kind of strange stuff going, and some people have been catching it. I saw some sisters on the screen jamming a white girl who went and put BLM painted it on the wall somewhere. And the sister said, "You not black. What you doing spray painting the wall? Because they're gonna come after us. They're not gonna come after you." So she was catching it right there. I was going to say, one reason I said this about the phone, and this, we had the SNCC office, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee back in the day. We used to call all over the world because we were involved in supporting African liberation movements in Southern Africa and different parts of the movement. We were, of course, against the war in Vietnam. You know, I met with the North Vietnamese and the National Liberation Front in South Vietnam. We went to Canada and met with them. We did a lot of stuff. And we were on the phone talking to some of everybody all the time. And we ran up quite a phone bill. And even as high as the phone bill got, they never turned it off because the police were listening. They came one time, they put a camera, they parked a van, caddy corner across the street from where our second office had been located. And we went up and looked, they had the windows all smoked up, but they had a camera in there where they used to film people coming in and out of the office and so on. Often you have to also be careful. The person that's in the organization that talks about, well, let's go hit this. Let's go do this person in and all that. The one that's got all that mouth, you gotta look at them. The one that comes in with all those ideas talking about, because that's also been the history of the movement. You know, somebody talking about let's go do somebody in or blow something up. The one that was talking the most about it, they end up in many situations, they ended up being the police, encouraging everybody else to go do something. But yeah, there's some other things. You know, I always think about Che. Che talked about how you had with the guerrilla, when you're an urban guerrilla, whether you're in the urban or in the bush, you were the three constants, you know, constant vigilance, constant mistrust, and constant mobility. You're always on the lookout. You very cautious about who you trust, and you always on the move, you know, because the moving target's hard to hit. But you read, when you read, Jim Foreman taught me, if you're going to make revolution, you have to study revolutionaries. Another big thing, and Frantz Fanon talked a lot about this, what we have to be concerned about is you can take power, and many African Caribbean nations saw this happen, when you took power away from the Europeans who had colonized the people, colonize your island or your country, and then the people who end up taking charge look just like you, but they're the national bourgeoisie. They're the Black people or the indigenous people who simply wanted to replace the white man and maintain the same system. I lived in Belize for quite a while, until recently. And in Belize, you got people of color running the country, but the people who live in Belize are, for the most part, especially Black people, are dirt poor and live in shacks. But anyway, I don't want to get stuck there, but those are just some of the things. No. If you're going to make revolution, you study revolution. I wrote another book. This is one called The Truth About the Watts Summer Festival. After the Watts Uprising, you had a lot of people grab the microphones and hold press conferences, take credit for the uprising, and forecast future uprisings if their demands weren't met, and they didn't do anything. We didn't know them from nobody, but they were the ones that got the payouts when the government started pouring money into the community to head this off and head that off. They're the ones that got the money, and they exist right now. I could call some names, but I want to be polite.
Name them,
but
sir.
You got
Name
them right
them.
now.
Al Sharpton.
Al Sharpton's one of them. You know, Al Sharpton once wore a microphone when some Black people came to him because he didn't like them. He wore the FBI convinced him to wear a microphone, and he recorded them. So
nobody cares.
Yeah, and it's like nobody, like that. I remember that from way back. That's our history.
I
There's
heard he
people-
tried to tell the get
There's
the
some people
brothers to tell him Asada.
who,
I heard that he tried to, with that wiretap in that briefcase, he tried to get some of them to tell him where Asada was.
okay, might have been, yeah, you see. Yeah.
I wanted to ask a slightly shifted, different kind of question, although the piece that you say, Ron, about Belize, you know, in terms of my own experience growing up in LA, it's just very striking to see this situation where you have a Black mayor for so long, you know, and you have that symbol of access, but then you have this white police chief and this very brutal police force, but also, you know, people get hung up on this idea of, you know, this Black face in a high place, whether it's Bradley or Obama, or now they're,
Thank you.
you know, so I just wonder maybe if you want to touch base on, you know, because you ran across the Bradley people over so many years, over so many struggles, from the school police issue to South Africa to the LAPD. Just if you want to maybe give some thought about how people can think about this issue of Black political people and electoral things and that whole piece.
I'll say this right up front. Ultimately, it's class struggle. It's not racial struggle. It's class struggle. Because of course, during slavery, you had some Black people get out of slavery and become slave owners themselves. In fact, there's quite a number of books that have been written about them now and stories told about them. Tom Bradley, interestingly enough, came out of Calvert, Texas, which is the same hometown for my mother, where she was born. My mother used to tell us stories when we were children. She was taken from the colored school where she went periodically to the fields to chop cotton. And she resented that very much. And so I struggle, much of the reason I struggle is because of my mother. The oldest ancestor, by the way, on my family tree that we're aware of is a woman named Harriet, who was taken from Culpeper County, Virginia, a couple of years before the Civil War on a wagon by a white man with the last name Richards. She was taken to Milam County, Texas, where you have the town of Rockdale. And it was from there that just a few miles away is Calvert. Ultimately, as the family grew and branched out, my mother was born there in Calvert. But Tom Bradley grew up in Calvert. He was part of a family that was about sharecropping, but he eventually made his way to LA just as my mother did, but he joins the police. He was part of Newton Division. He got rank. He used to ride herd on Black people. I need to say this too. Back in the day, we'd much rather be stopped by a white cop than a Black cop, because when Black cops would stop us, they would show out. They'd slap you around, kick you down to impress their white handlers, which is what we still see happening today. In fact, I was just being told by my son today that some of the data he's looked at is for a while now, as they've been looking at all these killings of especially young Black men by police in the country, that Black police are play a central role, and in some ways a role that's either even with the white cops that are killing us, or even more so, that Black police, George Floyd, one of those cops there was Black. Y'all know that? This is the other reality, which is very interesting, very strange when you understand. It's almost like, why would you go in the military? Why would you be part of the US military? Because the US don't go abroad and carry on war for any good reason. Why would you go be part of a team that's making war on another group of people who only yesterday sold your mama? They sold your mama not very long ago, and you now gonna join their force and call who they call the enemy too? I refuse to go to Vietnam. We said back in the day, we couldn't spell Vietnam. We had never heard of it, didn't know where it was. And no Vietnamese called us any names. I told the white man, I said, but you've called me names. So if you give me a weapon, who you think I'm gonna shoot? I'm being careful. I'm saying this to the security conscious people. Somebody that raised those earlier questions. You got to watch how you talk, even on these things. So yeah, but if you give me a weapon, who you think I'm going to shoot? I didn't say who I was going to shoot, did I? You see what I'm saying?
You clear, clear.
About the word. So it's really important to be clear that what you fight for, you don't lose because some opportunists, some agent tours rise up and take credit and get the benefits.
So we got a question, and it's kind of, and you had mentioned Texas, so it's kind of a logical place to move into it. I guess it's a two-part question. The sister asked in the chat what non-Black folks can do to support the struggle of African Americans, of Black folks in the States, of Africans in the diaspora. And by the way, I stole both these pictures from Professor Jorge Mariscal's Facebook page. So that's where I got those two from. But I just, when we see the parallels between what's happening in our own community and the violence, the state violence against Latino people and vigilante violence against them at the same time, I'd just like to get your sense about how you think about the question of Black-brown politics, the extent to which you would frame it as this question of what other groups can contribute to a Black struggle, the extent to which you frame it instead as a question of where the common points of struggle are, how you think and teach and talk about that question of Black-brown politics and unity.
I'm glad you raised that, because first and foremost, we should keep in mind that Mexico, first of all, before I even go there, let me just say this about Mexico. The United States, after a contrived war from 1846 to 1848, took 55% of Mexico's most fertile land. Mexicans culturally had a history of coming north of the Rio Grande, coming into what is now the US Southwest, because the most fertile lands are here and life was better for them coming here. The United States took it at gunpoint, which was a criminal act. And any honest teacher in elementary school should tell students that it was a criminal act. The teachers don't do that. And so with Trump, for example, I don't even want to bring his name up, but with Trump talking about putting up a wall, come on, this is Mexico. That's the other, I wanted to say that first. But the other thing I wanted to say is that there's some major developments historically having to do with Mexican and Black solidarity that most of us miss, both Mexican people and Black people. First of all, it was Afro-Mexicans that played a central role in helping Mexico win its independence from Spain. From 1810 to 1821, the Mexican freedom struggle. The army, Father Hidalgo called on Mexico's people in 1810 to rise up and overthrow Spanish rule, but he also said that the aims of the struggle would also include eliminating slavery in Mexico as it under Spanish rule at that time. Mexicans have always found slavery abhorrent. It was the Spanish who carried on slavery in Mexico. But it was after Father Hidalgo fell on the battlefield 9 months into the struggle, it was Jose Morelos, who was also a revolutionary priest, who became the head of the main Mexican army. He led it for the next 5 years. They used to refer to the army as Ejército Moreno, the dark army, because the complexion of so many of the fighters was dark. The Blacks rallied to the call to fight the Spanish because one of the objectives was to also eliminate slavery. That should never be forgotten. Morelos was eventually captured and executed too by the Spanish. And who took up the leadership of the main Mexican army? Was Guerrero, Vicente Ramon Guerrero, who also, by the way, both Morelos and Guerrero had African roots. And it was Guerrero who's known in Mexican history as the consummator of independence, the one who dealt the final blow. By the way, the Mexican army in those battles with the Spanish, led by Morelos, they carried a black flag onto the battlefield. The first flag of Mexico was a black flag. This is history, you gotta know, you know. Again, advice is free, but you pay for experience. I'm going back to Irving Davis. Guerrero was the one who outlawed slavery in 1829 officially, but they actually ended it in 1821 when they took power from the Spanish and began to rule themselves. Guerrero was deceived. He was taken aboard a ship and he was executed. He was executed February 14th, 1831. When you ask most students, you go to these schools, you ask the black and brown students in the classroom, what's the meaning of February 14th? What are they gonna tell you? Valentine's Day. Then you ask them the next question and say, if you're Italian, raise your hand. No hands go up because they're not Italians, they're Mexicanos, they're African students, okay? We should remember Guerrero on February 14th because that's the day he was executed. And what's so great about that is that he was both Mexican and African. And because he grew up illiterate as a slave driver, as a mule driver, he wanted all Mexican people to be literate. So he was about establishing schools all over the country. So he was very great, very special. We should remember him for that. So that's a major point. And unfortunately, many Mexicanos, not only do Africans in this country not know this, but many Mexicanos don't know that history. Because I've been in Mexico talking to students there and they didn't know the history. Another major piece from the other side is that during slavery in the United States, thousands of our ancestors, enslaved ancestors, ran south, especially through Texas, across into Mexico, where Mexican people took us in, they shielded us, they would not turn us back over to the slaveholders. The Tejanos, those Texas Mexicans, used to help us plot uprisings as well as escapes and all that. But that's some of the beauty of this history. The United Farm Workers Unions, for example, everybody knows Cesar Chavez, but one of the best contracts the UFW ever got was in 1974 by a brother named Mac Lyons, who was on the national executive of the United Farm Workers Union, who grew up poor in Texas, used to work the fields. He was Florida state director, and he got a contract with Coca-Cola, which owns Minute Maid, which controls a lot of the orange groves in Florida, and got much better working conditions for Black people there and for working in those fields and others. But this is just some of the history that one needs to know. And when you don't know, you know, what can I say?
Yes, easy for people to be manipulated and confused. We got a question from the audience about your assessment, your take, your sense of what's happening today on the streets, the movement that has emerged in the last few weeks in the United States and throughout the world around confronting white supremacy, you know, past and present in the US. Your sense of what you see through your own particular lens of experience.
I'm watching it with a lot of interest. I have not been be very honest, I have not been very happy with this generation in terms of what it's been doing. I'm glad to see this going on. I'm also happy there's also in terms of Black-Brown unity, a lot of that's in the street, and that's something that we should be applauding. The white people who are out there, I think many white people have gotten out there because the killing of George Floyd was so graphic and so disgusting. I think that's what got a lot of white people up out of their chairs and into the streets. But then a number of the people who are out there are, some are opportunists who are just breaking windows and taking stuff, you know. I'm not that I'm completely against that, but I'm just saying that's just some opportunistic stuff on the part of some people. Then there are the agents. We talked about some of that, the people who are putting BLM on the wall and they're not even Black people, and some guys that were arrested for shooting some police, because what some of the whites want to do, and what's been part of Trump's agenda, I think, is to move the country toward martial law, where they just lock the country down and shoot people without any explanation, and just across the board and do all that. I think his generals, the heads of the military, have kind of thrown Trump off because they just said they don't see putting U.S. troops on the streets to move against the people of this country. And so that's kind of short-circuited some of what Trump wanted. The other thing is that the demonstrations have, many people have insisted that just simply be protests without destruction and burning. And so they've kind of gotten their way a lot. I'm not all that excited about Black Lives Matter. And I'm going to say this. It's been next month to mark 4 years when a Black man in Dallas, after a lot of the shootings had been taking place, went up in some buildings in Dallas, and he ended up taking out 5 police. Everybody remembers that. And that was on the 8th of July, by the way. And then about 7 or 8 days later, a brother in, where was it? Was it New Orleans? Baton Rouge. He went out and he shot 6 police, 3 of whom he managed to take out. And what was interesting about that, and hear me very well, what's interesting about that is that for the next several weeks and months, there was a noticeable decline across the country in the number of Black men shot by police. What that says is that something that Malcolm said that was so true: if it's an eye for an eye and a head for a head, you get some results. What's interesting, and my problem with Black Lives Matter, is when the media came up to Black Lives Matter people and said those men were part of your group, Black Lives Matter said, oh no, they were not. We didn't know them, and we don't condone what they did. We ain't about that. I want to make it very clear, you never denounce your warriors. You never denounce your warriors. That first brother was 25 years old, had been in the military. Both them guys, the last one left a suicide note saying it was definitely payback. And the one in Dallas made it very clear it was payback. And so you never denounce your warriors. In the Alert Patrol, I was one of the attorneys on at Hartsfield, great brother, he's passed on now. But we were having a press conference with the Alert Patrol, and the media asked me, they said, well, you all are at night patrolling these streets in LA and looking for the police who are into wrongdoing. Suppose you see some of your own people, some Black people doing something. Are you going to turn them in? And I said right away, I looked them dead right in their demo work in their eyes. I said, we are not snitches for no police. And the attorney got on me later. He said it might have been a better way to say it, because one of the things you say when you got more sophistication politically, you just say no comment on the comment. You know, you find some other way to get around it. But I just said, no, we are not snitches. And I have I want any Black Lives Matter person looking at this and hearing what I said, I'm telling you I'm making very clear, you never denounce your warriors. Never denounce your warriors. That first brother, they were so afraid of him, the way they got him, they had to send a damn robot in there with some explosives to get him. Not one of their men would go up there to get him. All right. So, but anyway.
So one of the things we haven't really touched on yet directly, but I know is a part of your own political history and how you see the interconnections of struggles across different places. We have started to see some activity in places like, Brazil, Mexico, the Caribbean, and the Black and brown immigrant communities of Europe, on the continent, around the struggle for our humanity and our survival and our existence. And so I guess I want to maybe have you give for folks a basic definition of what you would call internationalism, how you see people develop that kind of internationalist consciousness, and what parts of the world you feel people should look to try to educate themselves around to get a better sense of perhaps global elements of struggle.
Huh. Well, you already said it. You just said it. That's internationalism. Look, all these African nations just a couple of days ago, led by Burkina Faso, they have all said that they want a discussion now. They brought it up in the UN. This is some powerful stuff. It's always, for the most part, it's been the other way around. It's been those of us who were conscious here struggling in support of African liberation movements and so on. Now, here African nations have gone in and said, our brothers and sisters in the US having a difficult time with racism, with the US racism, and we want the UN, we calling the US on the carpet about it. And what it's doing is the US already has very little credibility in the world. Now they've lost what little credibility they've had because of all these stains on their reputation, as it were. So that's great. It's interesting. It's really interesting. I want to say something about something else about some whites, because while I'm very critical of whites, we said with Black Power that the best thing white people could do for us was write a check and get out of the way. But I want to speak about a couple of white people back in the day. They're not here anymore. One couple was Herb and Shirley Magidson. They lived in Beverly Hills, 1450 Carla Ridge. I never forget. I used to pick up James Baldwin at the airport, take him up to the house, and they would get all their white friends and they'd have them bring their checkbooks. Baldwin would get up and praise the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. When he'd get through, they would tell him to be quiet and sit down and tell the white people to get their checkbooks out and write us checks. Herb and Shirley Magidson were serious white people, Jewish people who owned a business and who wrote us big checks to make things happen. I want to speak about somebody else named Abe Weisberg. I could give a whole talk on great white people who got down. Abe Weisberg was in New York. He headed a group called White Americans in Support of Black Liberation. And when Martin King was killed, I happened to be on the road in St. Louis. I was helping a sister drive to New York to be Jim Foreman's office administrator. And we got to New York and we went to a big demonstration in Central Park, and Rockefeller was governor then, and he came out and he started giving a speech about how much he admired King and all that. And Jim Foreman knew better. Foreman had a cane. We in the park and he's rapping the cane on the park bench on the table, making all this noise, interrupting Rockefeller, and the New York police were moving in on us. Abe Weisberg had a group of white men, and they came through the center between the police and us. They formed a wedge, and the police didn't touch us. And I had never been so grateful to a white man. But that was Abe Weisberg. These are serious white people who got down. I ain't talking about somebody putting BLM on the wall. I'm talking about some people who were serious and who threw down, who got down for us. I met Marlon Brando. You know Marlon Brando, and I think I can say it. He gave guns to the Panther Party. And by the way, I was speaking about the Panther. I'm in all the Panther films. I was there. I had hair and I had my little afro and stuff. Had my leather jacket. We had leather jackets, by the way, before Panthers. We had guys from our neighborhood, from Slauson, take a car and go to Beverly Hills on Sunset to Wilson's house of suede and leather and run the car through the plate glass window at Wilson's house of suede and leather. It took all the leather coats. This was a few years before '66, before the Panthers even came into existence. We were wearing leather coats here. And depending on your rank in the neighborhood, that determined what quality coats you got, how many you got. I got a couple of leather coats. I didn't have no real rank. I was down here somewhere, but I got a couple of leather coats out of that. And so this is history. This is knowing real history, other than just something out of somebody's textbook.
Yeah, and you know the thing.
People talk about Angela Davis. Angela was in San Diego in '67. I met her at a demonstration, and we got to talking. And I liked what she said. I persuaded her to come to LA at the beginning of 1968, help us form a SNCC chapter here, and she did. she had some shortcomings, which I don't want to get into, but I hear all this praise. But I said, when I teach and I talk about people in the movement, I know them. I ain't talking about, I ain't made some stuff, just make something up or read something from somebody wrote in some damn book. I can tell you about the real people.
I recently had a conversation with a brother who wrote that Angela Davis is one of the biggest sellouts. And I thought that criticism, number one, I told him self-criticism becomes before criticism. He has some work to do. We went there. But her abolitionist work, because I'm into prison abolition, I work heavily in the prisons. What were some of those shortcomings that, because a lot of us, I'm a 70s baby. I was born in 75. So a lot of us were products of what you did.
Yeah. I don't want to get into it too much because let me say this. I don't have a beef with Angela. The last time I saw her was in the 90s, somewhere in the 1990s. I was working in Santa Monica at the high school, and she came to speak at a middle school in Santa Monica. And I heard she was coming, so I went there, got there early and saw her, and we sat on the front row in the auditorium, and people hadn't arrived yet. And we were just talking about different people we knew and what happened to so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so. She was there with all these white women, big old rough-looking white women, and I didn't pay her much mind. You laughing because you know what's up. But we talked for a while, and after a while, one of the women came and we had a chair, an empty chair between the two of us. One of them plopped down right in that chair between the two of us. And that essentially ended our conversation. And so I gradually got up and I left. Angela, what thrust Angela into the limelight was, I think, two major events. One of the guys I knew the first two guys she got involved with romantically when she came up from San Diego here. But she got involved in the Communist Party, right? And she was going to teach at UCLA. I went to her first presentation, by the way, but she got into a thing with Ronald Reagan, who didn't want a member of the Communist Party at UCLA. And that's what put her in the limelight, number one. And then the next big thing was with Jonathan Jackson, with George Jackson's younger brother, and some things that tied him to Angela as a part of that whole Marin County courthouse shootout thing. But that's what, and of course her affair with George Jackson, but that's what thrust her into the limelight. She was in SNCC, we all had responsibilities, and she was to help us develop what we call a liberation school at the church up the street from the office, and that never materialized. And I do hold that against her. But I don't want to make a whole lot of noise about it because, like I said, I'm not beefing with her. Right. But I'm just saying she's got part of the problem is that for Black women in this country, so many men, we're chauvinists and we push women back. And I think more history books have been written by men than women. I'm always encouraging sisters to develop as historians and write the histories and get it right. So because sisters don't have more models pushed out there, they really hold Angela up very high, and they were, So I won't say more, but I just, because I'm not about to tear her down, yeah.
Let me ask we got a couple of interesting questions from the Q&A, one of which touched on the difference between community control of police and police abolition. You did speak a little bit to abolition, but when we hear this term community control, is it a meaningful term, and is there a way to make it meaningful, or do we see it as a kind of term of maybe like has a counterinsurgency element to it, hearts and minds kind of thing? So that's one, the sort of, is the terminology of community control, is it a possibility politically? And the second is from Yusuf Bunchi Shakur with Community Movement Builders. I think he's in Detroit. And he wanted to know if you see SNCC as just a kind of legacy of SNCC, what you think SNCC did uniquely well? What, if any, limitations you see toward SNCC as an organization over a whole? What we can see as its historic role and legacy in the movement?
Well, let me try to deal with the first one first. I think community control of the police would be very tough. But I think that we've gained ground. I think these protests, not just inside this country, but since it's global, and I think it's got this country off balance. I think some things can be put in place, like eliminating chokeholds and some of the profiles and the profiling and some of the stop and search and all. I think some of that stuff can be brought under control. But I think that the police, I'm for abolition of the police. I think the money that the police get and the weapons and all that stuff. For example, one of the things they talk about sometime back, they talk about they're going to give the police human relations training. What the hell is human relations? If you're not a human being, you should have never got hired. You see what I'm saying? Who gonna hire you if you ain't no damn human being? So I don't think community control is really possible, but I think community alert patrol, I think to patrol them, to monitor them while we push up closer to defunding to abolition is the way to go. Okay? I think that's the way, and I think we've got enough, all these protests have given us enough clout, enough political clout as a people, as a movement to push in that way. Your other question was
about SNCC. How to think about what SNCC did well.
SNCC is interesting, and I have to admit some real weaknesses here. In the picture, I was glad you showed a foreman with Martin Luther King. SNCC's style was very different from SCLC. Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael made this clear, and Foreman made it clear. Others made it clear in the organization. You see how Foreman is dressed? He wore coveralls or overalls along with his tie because he wanted Black people in the South, especially places like Mississippi, Alabama, to know that SNCC workers were coming and what we're going to stay there with them. We weren't just coming down for the weekend. With Martin King, a lot of the people with him would come just for a moment, for a short period of time, and they would leave. But people in the South who had been terrorized by these lynchers, these damn police and stuff, wanted to know that you were going to be there for the duration. And that was an interesting thing about SNCC and its legacy, and something that many people will always remember. SNCC people, by the way, I need to say, many of them came from families that were well off. They were students. And to go to school, to have money to go to school, if you were dirt poor, that was something that was very tough for you. And so I came into SNCC in '67. SNCC developed the Black Power position in '66. And that's the only reason why I came in '67 is because they were about SNCC was about Black Power. When people talk about equality and integration, equality, my real question is, who are white people to be equal to? Given the kind of savagery that white people have engaged in as a group throughout the world in terms of dominating other people, how you gonna want to be equal with them? So I wasn't about any struggle for equality. But the other thing, the major thing I want to get out here is that when I came into SNCC, I came in essentially out of the streets. I grew up poor. My mother there were 5 of us, and she was a single parent. She struggled very hard to raise us. And I didn't come in with any I didn't come in out of academia, or I didn't come in as a student. That's something I did later, after SNCC. And I have to tell you, there were a number of people in SNCC who are major players in the organization who had been there from the beginning, who have some resentment toward me. It's interesting too that if in North Carolina, at what's the college, and I think it's in Durham, but they have a SNCC legacy committee and set up there in the university there. And they have the whole history of SNCC and where it operated. They leave out LA SNCC. Los Angeles SNCC for them never existed, because for the time it was in existence, I was the director of the LA office. I later became deputy chairman for the Western region. I was elected in the organization, but I was resented because I came from the street and I didn't come from a background where my parents had money and I went to college and stuff. And I've discussed that with some other SNCC people. And it's interesting because this past April, SNCC was going to hold in Washington, D.C., its 60th anniversary. And I was going to go and I was going to take them to task. I was going to tell them, in fact, I was going to tell them, why isn't LA SNCC part of the legacy material that you all have put together and so on? And how come I'm not on the list? I have to learn best way I can about it. I'll tell you about another interesting brother, Willie Mukasa Ricks. He's the brother on the Meredith March in 1966 from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi. And James Meredith was shot in the leg by a racist along the way. And so Kwame Ture and Willie Mukasa Ricks and others took up the march. And that's where Mukasa shouted Black Power. And that's where Black Power comes from. We call him the Black Power man. Just July, I drove down to Atlanta from here. I didn't have nothing else to do. Drove down there and I saw him, hadn't seen him in years. And so I think Black Power, this whole, in terms of SNCC's legacy, I think putting Black Power out there is something that the organization needs to remember. I'm gonna tell you something else that Mukasa told me. Every time I get with him, I fall out because there's so much he tells me that I hadn't known before. You know, he comes out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. He was in the pool room shooting pool, and that's how he got recruited into SNCC. And you should see him, or you may have that, where he spoke at James Foreman's memorial in Washington.
Yeah, we'll put it up for people. We'll clip it and we'll put it up.
Good. Well, he's a beautiful brother. But one of the things he told me, and I'll tell you, this is just something to think about. When he shouted Black Power, this was June '66. The Panthers came into existence in October '66. One of the other problems we had with the Panther Party is all the white people they brought back into the hood. They brought all you know, you have to understand how that happened. We found out in SNCC that Bobby Seale, even though he was chairman, he didn't run the party. He didn't run the party. Huey ran the party initially, but Huey very early on got into the altercation with Oakland PD and got locked up. So he was removed. Eldridge had come out of the pen. Eldridge ran the party, Eldridge Cleaver. Why did Eldridge go to the pen? Now, I'm gonna get real ugly here. Eldridge went to the pen because he had raped white women. He used to practice raping sisters. If you read the book, Soul on Ice, he laid it all out. Eldridge had this fascination with white people. And he brought them all into the community. When we were trying to push white people out, we told them, we said, go organize white people who some of them put on sheets at night. We want you to talk to them and organize them. Leave the Black people to us. We'll organize our own people. Okay? So that was another big thing. I can tell you an interesting story. We had the alliance with the Panther Party in '68. And we went to San Francisco. I was with Jim Foreman and Mukasa Ricks. We were in this big park. We're coming over a hill, and we going to meet Eldridge Cleaver and other leadership in the party. We get to the top of the hill and look down. We see a whole bunch of white people by the stage down there. And so Mukasa stops. He said, oh, he had this thing about stuttering. Oh. And I said, man, what's wrong with you, man? He said, who is that down there? I said, that's the Panthers, man. Because I could see Cleaver in the group. He said, blah, 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 blah. I said, I ain't going no further. I said, man, what's your problem? He said, let me tell you something. He said, I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee. When we see that many white people, they coming to beat us up. I said, but no, that's the Panthers. That's how they roll. That's the Cleaver right down here with them. I said, this is a difference. Let me tell you something else. So
and then we should let people.
Huh?
I said,
Yeah.
Then we should let people. We should probably wrap up.
Okay.
I can listen to this all day.
Me too.
Let
Me
me tell
too.
you this last little thing he told me in Atlanta. He said when he shouted Black Power, the Panthers countered several months later when they came into existence with Power to the People. Think about it. He was talking about power for Black people. The Panthers were saying under Cleaver's leadership, power to the people, talking about everybody. We weren't talking about, we're not dismissing other people, but we saying we want some power for Black people. And that was a put down of the SNCC position with Black Power. I said, damn, man, you hit it right on the head. So I just thought I would drop that. You said, I know we got to try to wind down here.
Well, we should. I do want to let people have the opportunity. One of the things that we try to do in Pillars as a Malcolm-inspired organization is we do, you know, Khalid tries to keep us and Layla on,
Okay.
on time, you know, but we do want to put a couple of things out and then I'll turn it over. One is just to thank you for sharing your time, thoughts, and expertise, especially tell us that Irving Davis quote again. How does it go?
Advice is
About-
free, pay for experience. Which
Advice
one?
advice is free, but you pay for experience.
And I've told my son, and he's told his daughter, and she's repeating it all the time.
All right. So I'll hand it back over to Layla and Khalid, but I just, Ron, want to thank you again for taking the time to share with us and to really help us in this really critical moment as we try to think about which way to go forward.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so, so much. I wanted to let everybody in the audience know that all of these books that the Baba, the elder, just told us about, we're going to have a Google Drive. You'll be able to look those books up. So I know it seemed like he was going fast, very well read, well learned, intelligent, genius elder, but we'll be able to then take our time and catch up. The second thing is, don't forget Reclaiming Our Stories is tomorrow at 2 p.m. If you would like the information, it's on our Facebook page. This has been one of the best things that I've ever dealt with in my life, that I've ever experienced, sir. I'm a 70s baby.
Thank you,
So-
sister. Thank you. You're beautiful. You're beautiful. Yes.
This is like at the highlight of my lifetime experiences. We got some brothers in the pen listening, and they are very moved too. So I just want to thank you so much for what you've done today.
Thank you, sister. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
And I'll just jump in here at the end. Thank you, Dr. Danny Widener, Layla, you know, always strong. And brother Ron Wilkins, I can't express the amount of gratitude that we have for you joining us today, to be able to learn from your leadership, to be able to learn from your experiences, and your deep knowledge in all of these issues that are so pertinent and everything that we're seeing on the streets, in the capitals, on TV, all over the place. So thank you so much. Truly grateful and honored to have had you participate in our political education classes.
Brother Khalid, thank you. Thanks for your comments and having me as well.
Right on. So that's it, everybody. Thanks again for tuning in. Layla, I don't know if you have any last kind of closing words for us.
No, I put the link up so I can rewatch it a few times.
Yeah, we're going to have that link up soon. Go ahead.
Too much game in one meeting. I need to go over this a few times.
Yeah, real talk. So yeah, a lot of information. We're going to go ahead and again, we'll be posting that. Special shout out to Jean-Louis and Mimi for making sure that everything ran smoothly. And again, thanks everybody. All power And Black Power. Let's keep pushing. Let's see how we can continue to support Black organizations, Black movements. And I think the one of the biggest takeaways is you know what? I'm gonna leave that takeaway again, but a lot of knowledge in there. We will never turn away from our warriors. We will always accept them. And we will always encourage people to struggle in any way, shape, or form and capacity they can until this evil system of white supremacy and international capitalism is destroyed.
That's right.
Thank you.
All right, everybody.
Okay.